Hi, I'm Ali MacGraw, and I'm so happy to be able to be here with you tonight to join in our celebration for...
When my marriage to Steve fell apart and the public's version of my fairy tale kind of went into crisis.
She was the star of Love Story, Hollywood's golden girl of tragic romance. But behind Ali MacGraw's iconic role was a hidden truth no one saw coming. Decades later, she's finally revealing the secret that changed everything. And it's nothing fans expected. This isn't just a movie memory. It's a revelation, a warning, and a story that still echoes through time. The real Ali MacGraw. Ali MacGraw didn't grow up in the safety of a Hollywood fairy tale. Her childhood was marked by chaos, a father battling alcoholism, and a home where emotions were always on edge. Love in that environment wasn't steady or warm. It was uncertain, often cold. From a young age, Ali learned to read people, manage moods, and shrink herself to avoid trouble. That emotional balancing act would later become her secret weapon on screen. Before she became a face on movie posters, Ali found a path through fashion. Modeling wasn't about chasing fame, it gave her a sense of order. The poses, the styling, the structure of shoots all offered her something her early life never could: predictability. While others saw glamour, she saw safety. In a world where nothing at home felt stable, fashion became her quiet escape. Her beauty opened doors, but it was her quiet strength that made her stand out. Unlike other aspiring actresses who spent years grinding through small roles, Ali's entry into film felt almost sudden. Her work in Goodbye, Columbus caught the right eyes, and critics quickly praised her natural style. But she didn't come through acting schools or theater backgrounds. She came with emotion, raw and unfiltered. And that was something the industry didn't expect. Love Story arrived like a tidal wave. The script was simple, the love tragic, and the audience completely captured it. Ali didn't just play the part of Jennifer Cavallari, she embodied it. Every look, every moment of silence on screen felt lived in, not acted. She wasn't performing emotions. She was channeling her own experiences, her childhood wounds, her longing to be enough. What made her performance so unforgettable wasn't technical skill. It was the truth. Ali brought a quiet sadness to Jennifer, not because it was written, but because she knew what emotional distance felt like. She didn't fake heartbreak, she carried it. And audiences could feel that difference. Behind her calm screen presence was someone who had spent years learning how to survive heartbreak without ever showing the cracks. This emotional honesty made her a star overnight, but it also became a trap. She became frozen in time as the girl who died young, an image too perfect to break out of. The public didn't see Ali as a person, they saw her as Jennifer. And that meant any move she made after had to match the image the world had already locked in. That kind of pressure is quiet, but crushing. There's a hidden cost to becoming an icon. For Ali, it meant losing ownership of her own narrative. She hadn't built her fame through control or strategy. She was simply open at the right time, and the world grabbed hold. But once the spotlight found her, it refused to let her evolve. Every future choice, every role, every public appearance had to echo the girl from Love Story. That's where the pain began. Not just in terms of career limits, but also in terms of who they were. Ali didn't think that playing sadness would make him famous. And as the roles and the applause wound down, the difference between her real self and her on-screen self became less clear. She always had the feeling that everyone loved her only when she was hurt. That realization would change everything that came after. In Love Story, Ali MacGraw wasn't acting. She was revealing. Most fans don't know this. It was impossible for her to leave Jennifer Cavallari because her personal life was so intertwined with the character. That show was a public diary in a lot of ways. Even though people liked how open she wasn't sure what to do with all the attention it brought her. This is where her story is different from most Hollywood stories. Ali didn't try to get the next big part. It wasn't her goal to become a bigger star. She began to pull away instead, partly because she was tired, and partly because she didn't know how to be someone else while everyone still saw her as Jennifer. The quick fame started to feel more like a chain than a present. Ali would think about how Love Story wasn't just a movie, but a turning point that cost her more than anyone knew. A lot of people knew her because of it, but she didn't fully understand who she was. The actress's role grew bigger than her. For that reason, it is tough to grow. Most fans didn't notice this, but Ali MacGraw's biggest role was also the one that held her back. Behind the flawless performance was a woman already breaking inside, and Love Story didn't help her heal. It hollowed her. Trapped in a tragedy. Love Story was never meant to become a big deal in pop culture. Little money, a simple script, and not much time to shoot made the movie possible. From casting to the final cut, everything was rushed. But in a strange way, the flaws made magic. Ali MacGraw was in the middle of it all, and his stillness became the film's heart. She didn't have weeks of practice or time to get ready. She hardly had time to talk to Ryan O'Neal before they had to start filming. The movie was better because it wasn't polished. Their relationship was real because of how honest they were with each other. It felt real because there were no filters on it. Arthur Hiller, the director, knew that Ali wasn't a trained actress. He didn't tell her to perform, he told her to be still and trust the silence. That silence helped her the most. The way she looked said more than any words could. Jennifer became a character who felt honest because she was careful. Ali looked calm and collected to the public, but she was carrying more than just a script. Behind her quiet birth was a lot of pain. She already had problems with being emotionally stable because of her past. She was giving up because of the stress of fame and her own insecurities. Love Story asked her to do more than just act. It asked her to remember. Every sad movie scene made her think of parts of her own life. It showed how she really felt. The loss, the helplessness, and the slow loss of control. She wasn't making those feelings up. She had actually felt them. That's what made people fall in love with the performance so much. But it also made Ali and Jennifer less clear. This is what most fans missed. They thought they were watching great acting, but they were actually watching a woman quietly unravel. Ali MacGraw wasn't just playing Jennifer, she was breaking on screen. The tears weren't scripted emotions. They came from years of feeling invisible, unsure, and emotionally lost. Fame didn't clear up that confusion. It made it worse. By the time Love Story wrapped, Ali admitted she already felt detached from herself. The role didn't just make her famous, it trapped her in an identity. She had to carry Jennifer off-screen too, smiling for the press, posing as the perfect tragic beauty, and living up to the illusion of America's sweetheart. That image became a costume she couldn't take off. It shaped how the world saw her, and slowly, it shaped how she saw herself. The applause was loud, but it drowned out her own voice. The world adored Jennifer Cavallari, the smart, witty, doomed girl next door. But no one stopped to ask what playing that role cost Ali MacGraw. She was praised for her grace, but that grace was covering something deeper. A growing sense of loss. Not career loss, but personal loss. She was starting to disappear behind the image. What kept Ali MacGraw trapped wasn't just the success of Love Story, it was how people responded to it. Audiences didn't want Ali, they wanted Jennifer. They weren't interested in who she truly was. They wanted the beautiful, tragic woman frozen in heartbreak. Hollywood noticed and kept sending her the same kinds of roles, expecting her to repeat the formula. In the years that followed, Ali tried to break free, but the roles offered were shallow, predictable, and lacking depth. She craved growth, complexity, something new, but the industry didn't see her that way. And privately, she wasn't sure how to push back or ask for more. That uncertainty kept her stuck. She had the spotlight, but not the freedom. And the very story that made her famous became the one she couldn't escape. The emotion she brought to Love Story was so real that it became a permanent part of her public identity. But for Ali, that emotion was connected to memories she hadn't processed. She was still learning how to handle grief, loss, and love in real life. Playing it on screen only stirred those feelings up. And with the world watching, she didn't have space to recover. What made her performance unforgettable is also what made it dangerous for her. She poured herself into a role that didn't let her come back out. She became frozen in time, forever young, forever sad, forever Jennifer. And when the cameras stopped rolling, the expectations didn't. She was stuck performing a version of herself that had nothing to do with who she wanted to become. Ali's story and Love Story was written by someone else, but it shaped her for years. It gave her global fame, but it also stole her voice for a long time. That's the part fans never realized. Her greatest success was the moment she started to lose control. And the cost of that is something no one ever saw in the final cut. The role that refused to let her go. After Love Story, Ali MacGraw became a global symbol of gentle heartbreak. But that recognition came with a price. She wasn't offered bold roles or complex characters. She was offered copies of Jennifer Cavallari, tender, passive, quietly beautiful. Hollywood didn't want the real Ali. It wanted the ghost of a girl who died in a movie. The industry froze her in time. Her stillness on screen, which had once felt powerful, became a trap. Producers didn't see an actress with range. They saw a brand, soft, delicate, and easy to market. It wasn't typecasting, it was emotional packaging. Ali had delivered a performance that was raw and real. But instead of rewarding that vulnerability with creative freedom, Hollywood locked her into a single idea. Jennifer Cavallari became more than a character. She became Ali's professional identity. No matter how much she changed, the offers didn't. The roles kept her living inside the same emotional bubble. Behind the scenes, she felt the tension growing. Her marriage to Robert Evans looked like a Hollywood success story. He was a studio head. She was America's sweetheart. On paper, it was perfect. In private, it was quiet and distant. Evans was powerful but unavailable. He was focused on his career, not connection. Ali, meanwhile, was still learning who she was. Fame had come fast, and she was still catching up emotionally. Their relationship became another performance, more about appearances than real closeness. The irony is that Love Story wasn't meant to sell fairy tales. It was supposed to question them. It was a story about how love ends, not how it saves you. But the public didn't see it that way. They turned it into a fantasy, and Ali into its living proof. Her sadness was romanticized. Her silence was mistaken for grace. Her pain became part of her image. And once the public embraced that version of her, the industry followed. Nobody asked what she wanted to say next. Ali longed for roles with challenge and depth, but each script she got felt smaller than the last. There was no edge, no risk, just a series of women meant to be pretty and passive. She started turning down parts, not because she didn't want to act, but because the parts didn't see her. She was being asked to disappear all over again. This wasn't just about Hollywood not knowing what to do with her. It was about how deeply they misunderstood her first success. She had given them something honest in Love Story, and they flattened it into a brand. They thought her tears were just good acting. They didn't realize they were real. What no one noticed at the time was that Ali was emotionally stuck. Her biggest role had locked her into her most fragile self. She couldn't grow publicly without disappointing the image people had of her. And that pressure to stay small followed her off-screen, too. It became a silent burden she carried for years. She tried to shift her career. Films like The Getaway offered a bit more grit. But even then, it wasn't enough to shake off the ghost of Jennifer. People still wanted the softness, the sadness, the woman who had said goodbye in the snow. They didn't want evolution. They wanted nostalgia. This is where Ali's story takes a turn most people don't see. Her career didn't fade because of bad choices. It faded because she had been emotionally typecast, not just professionally. Her truth had been sold back to her as fiction, and every time she tried to move past it, the door closed. What she gave Hollywood was rare, an untrained performance built on emotional honesty. Instead of protecting that, the industry recycled it. They didn't ask her what else she could do. They asked her to repeat what had already broken her. And when she didn't, they moved on. Ali MacGraw didn't get pushed out. She walked away slowly, realizing that continuing meant losing even more of herself. She wasn't chasing fame anymore. She was chasing freedom. And that's the story fans rarely hear. Steve McQueen didn't just change her life. He tested everything she believed about love, control, and the cost of being seen. When real love got messy. When The Getaway went into production, Ali MacGraw was riding the peak of her fame. But the film did more than put her on a new movie poster. It placed her face-to-face with someone who would change everything. Steve McQueen was a different kind of leading man. He wasn't polished or predictable. He was intense, magnetic, and carried a kind of chaos she had never known. On screen, they sizzled with chemistry. Off-screen, it was something much deeper. Steve wasn't like the men Ali had known in Hollywood. He didn't care about premieres or critics. What he wanted was control over his life, his space, and eventually, over her. Ali had just come off playing the world's most idealized woman. Jennifer Cavallari had suffered beautifully, quietly, and gracefully. Audiences fell in love with that image, and so had she in some ways. So when Steve McQueen offered her something raw, she jumped. It felt real, messy, flawed, and powerful. She left Robert Evans, her husband at the time, and walked into a life that promised truth over perfection. But the truth, in this case, came with rules. Steve didn't want Ali, the actress. He wanted Ali, the partner, to be silent, supportive, and always in the background. And she tried to become that. She stopped taking roles. She stepped out of the spotlight. At first, it felt like freedom from the pressures of Hollywood. But that freedom slowly turned into silence. She adjusted her life to his moods and desires, thinking that's what real love required. Ali later reflected that she had become invisible. This wasn't just a romantic disappointment. It was personal erasure. In trying to make love last, she had started editing herself out of the picture. Her days were spent keeping peace, not building joy. Her career didn't slip away. It was handed over, piece by piece. Steve McQueen was damaged in his own ways. He had a rough childhood, battled insecurity, and protected himself with anger and control. That damage spilled into their relationship. What Ali thought was intensity turned out to be volatility. Her silence, once a strength in acting, became a survival tool at home. The irony was brutal. She had been praised for playing a character who loved quietly and gave everything. Now she was living that same role in real life, only this time there was no script and no applause. And unlike in the movie, no one was crying for her. She was expected to smile and keep going. Her beach house life seemed perfect from the outside, but inside, the walls were closing in. She couldn't speak freely. She couldn't move freely. She began shrinking to fit someone else's needs. Again, the deeper truth is this. Love Story didn't just typecast her in Hollywood. It shaped how she saw love itself. The movie taught her that deep love means deep sacrifice, that giving everything, even your voice, was a sign of devotion. And because audiences rewarded that image, she carried it with her into real life. But in the real world, that mindset was dangerous. It made her believe that losing herself was noble, that being quiet was admirable, that putting someone else's comfort first meant she was winning at love. She didn't see the damage until it had already taken root. By the end of their marriage, Ali was a shell of the woman who once broke hearts on screen. Her identity was no longer hers. It was whatever Steve needed it to be that day. Her passion had been dulled. Her creativity had been buried. And the saddest part? She thought that was normal. When they separated, she didn't just leave a marriage. She started the slow process of coming back to life. But the recovery wasn't quick or clean. Years of silence don't disappear overnight. The emotional bruises lasted far longer than the headlines. Looking back, the tragedy of Love Story wasn't the death of Jennifer Cavallari. It was the way that role set a pattern, one that Ali then lived in real life. A pattern of emotional silence, of quiet suffering, of thinking love was about fading rather than growing. That's what makes this chapter in her story so powerful. Ali MacGraw's life with Steve McQueen shattered the fairy tale. It forced her to confront the difference between performance and reality. And in doing so, it revealed what Love Story never could. That real love doesn't ask you to vanish. It asks you to be seen. The vanishing and the slow return. When Steve McQueen died in 1980, Ali MacGraw was left with more than grief. She was left with silence, confusion, and an overwhelming sense of loss, not just of him, but of herself. The woman who once symbolized cinematic romance had nothing grounding her. Her career had faded. Her sense of self had faded even faster. She didn't collapse all at once. Instead, it was a slow unraveling. She numbed herself with alcohol and drifted through years of emotional emptiness. She kept going, but with no direction. Her public face remained calm, but privately, she was unraveling. By 1985, she reached her limit. The pain she had buried for so long could no longer stay hidden. She checked herself into the Betty Ford Center. At first, it seemed like a move to fight substance abuse, but that was only the surface. The real work was emotional. Through therapy, something deeper came into view. Ali began to see the pattern that had shaped her life. She had always given herself away, first in her family, then in her marriage, then in every relationship since. She wasn't addicted to fame or alcohol. She was addicted to disappearing. As a child, she learned to keep the peace. Her father struggled with alcoholism, and her home life demanded silence, not expression. That need to adapt followed her into adulthood. Love Story didn't create the habit, it simply rewarded it. Playing a woman who died for love felt familiar because Ali had been dying in pieces for years. The center gave her more than sobriety. It gave her language. She learned about emotional codependency, about how pleasing others had become her identity. For the first time, she stopped blaming men or fame. She looked inward and began asking different questions. When she left treatment, she didn't head back to Los Angeles. She didn't take meetings or search for roles. She drove to Taos, New Mexico, a place far removed from the world that had once defined her. It wasn't a retreat, it was a rebuild. Taos offered no flashing lights, no red carpets, no fans asking about Love Story. Instead, it gave her quiet. She found comfort in painting, in gardening, in feeding animals. The land didn't care about her past. It only asked her to be present. She walked through the desert, sat with her thoughts, and finally began to feel whole. Not perfect, not fixed, just whole. This was the version of Ali MacGraw that Hollywood never met. Calm, centered, and without the need to be seen. She began building relationships again, but this time, not ones that required sacrifice. She created a community around shared values, not performance. The woman who once vanished for love now stayed visible for herself. Slowly, her sense of self returned. What makes her story different isn't the fame or the fall. It's what came after. She didn't chase a comeback. She chased the truth. While many seek redemption through applause, she sought it in silence. Ali never returned to the top of the box office. She didn't need to. She didn't want to be remembered for tragedy, but for transformation. She found value not in scripts, but in sincerity. The applause had faded, but the healing had begun. In interviews later in life, her voice carried a new tone. There was clarity. She no longer tried to sound perfect. She simply told the truth. And the truth was, she had finally figured out who she was when no one was watching. What she did was rare. Most stories about fallen stars end with a comeback or a crash. Hers ended with balance. She didn't rebuild her fame. She rebuilt her identity. And that's what makes Ali MacGraw's story more than just a Hollywood tale. It's a case study in rebirth. She didn't reclaim the spotlight. She reclaimed herself. And in doing so, she gave us something far more valuable than a film. She gave us proof that peace is possible. Her greatest role wasn't Jennifer Cavallari. It was becoming Ali, fully, quietly, and finally. Her most iconic role became a lifelong mirror. It wasn't just a movie. It was the script she couldn't escape. It was never just a movie. Love Story became one of the most iconic films of its time. To many, it was about youth, romance, and the pain of goodbye. But to Ali MacGraw, it became something far deeper. It wasn't just a story she told. It was a script she unconsciously lived. Years later, she admitted it wasn't fiction. It was a reflection. Most people saw Jennifer Cavallari as a symbol of tragic beauty, but Ali now sees her as a symbol of emotional disappearance. Jennifer wasn't just a woman dying of leukemia. He was a woman fading in plain sight, quiet, elegant, self-sacrificing. She gave everything and asked for nothing. Ali didn't know it at the time, but she was rehearsing for something real. Playing, Jennifer trained her to equate love with silence. It taught her that disappearing was noble, that love meant staying small to keep the peace, that emotional strength meant holding pain without complaint. After the film's release, people called Ali America's sweetheart. But underneath that title, she was struggling. She had handed over so much of herself to one role that it became hard to separate real life from performance. And in the years that followed, she kept playing versions of Jennifer, not on screen, but in relationships, in silence, in self-erasure. The heartbreak of Love Story didn't stop with the credits. It followed her into her marriage, her choices, and her silence. The real story isn't about a fictional woman dying. It's about a real woman slowly losing her sense of self. Jennifer's fate was written in a hospital bed. Ali's was written in the way people expected her to live. The one detail most fans never noticed? Jennifer didn't just die from illness. She died from giving too much without ever being fully seen. And Ali nearly followed the same path, not physically, but emotionally. She got lost in the idea that love meant giving until there was nothing left. But unlike the film, her story didn't end in tragedy. Over time, she started waking up to what had happened. She began seeing the patterns, not just in her life, but in the way the world romanticizes women who disappear for others. It wasn't noble, it was painful, and it wasn't love. It was loss dressed up as devotion. That's why, decades later, Ali MacGraw is speaking clearly. Not to blame the film, not to regret it, but to reframe it. Love Story wasn't just a hit. It was a warning about confusing sacrifice with love and quietness with virtue. She learned that lesson, and she survived it. Today, she's not interested in being remembered as Jennifer Cavallari. She's interested in being remembered as someone who broke the pattern, who stepped out of the shadow, who chose truth over fantasy. She didn't get her old life back, but she found something better, herself. This chapter of her life is the one most fans missed. It's not in the movie. It's in the years that followed, in the silence she broke, and the healing she claimed. She's no longer trapped in a role. She's writing her own ending now, honest, imperfect, and real. For anyone watching who's ever felt like they had to shrink to stay in love, Ali MacGraw's story holds something powerful. It says, you don't have to disappear to be loved. You don't have to become someone else to be worthy. Real love doesn't ask you to vanish. It invites you to be seen. The real love story isn't on film. It's the one Ali finally lived, one where she loved herself enough to return from her disappearance. That's the part most fans never knew. That's the part that matters most. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Click on the next video popping up on your screen for more amazing content.